Our world and beyond. Space, in partnership with the European Space Agency.
The Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, where mountainous terrain rubs shoulders with some of the hottest and driest deserts in the world. It's a mosaic of people too, a mix of Orthodox and Protestant Christianity, of Islam and Judaism. Sitting at an altitude of more than 2,000 meters is the capital Addis Ababa, which means new flower in the country's official language, Amharic. For the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, better known as the FAO, the city is the operational center for the whole of Eastern Africa.
Ethiopia, which is the very largest country here, it's the second largest country in Africa, has had about 4 successive years of increasing production of cereals. And therefore there's a reason to show that things can work. Having said that, it is still fragile, with a failure of the short rains, which account for about 15% of the grain in this country. The totals for the whole sub-region suffer, and therefore we have reason to be a little concerned.
Pack animals and cattle are among the main resources for the population, and people rely on them for survival when things become difficult too. Their safety is of paramount importance.
During the current drought in the south of Ethiopia, FAO and other NGOs are implementing a lot of animal feeding programs. Potentially, satellite imagery could assist in identifying places where there is still a lot of grass, even at the end of the dry season.
Basic food commodities have gone up in price 56% since 1986, hitting one of the most fragile countries head-on. The FAO's role is to evaluate the structural needs and to implement targeted projects financed by the international community. Ethiopia divides roughly into 2, the high central plateau and the much more arid lowlands, like the Afar Triangle on the border with Djibouti. In Argoba, they're vaccinating goats. It's a simple equation. If the animals die, so do the people. This operation is part of an FAO livestock project paid for by Norway. Knowledge of local weather is also vital. In hostile environments, the nomads know to look around for conditions to survive.
Previously, there was no sort of any agricultural or meteorological data that were helpful to predict or to understand the meteorological situation of the area. But this time, now they can record the rainfall. They have got also the wind speed and others which are required basically by the meteorological station.
In the same vein, there's a water management project with the construction of dams and the improvement of irrigation canals. These projects put the means in place. The object then is to help the local population manage the resources themselves.
The major threats in this area for us are number 1, drought. The second is flooding. Thirdly, we have the insects, like plagues of locusts. I should add one more, which is the wild weeds, particularly the Parthenium.
Whether it's drought or thundering floods which sweep away anything in their path, swarms of locusts which can destroy a crop in a matter of moments, parasitic plants, all make for a fragile ecosystem. And yet there's an unseen eye keeping a constant watch for the farmers of Africa, and indeed other continents, from way above their heads. And they are satellites. And Europe is contributing with Envisat, the huge Earth observation satellite from the European Space Agency. At the FAO headquarters in Rome, they use satellite data supplied from space agencies around the world. Here, it's possible to follow coverage of vegetation and weather conditions virtually in real time. And that gives scientists a valuable forecasting tool and, to some degree, an early warning system.
The satellites are really a beginning of a very long chain of events that take place from the time that the satellite sees that a drought is starting, that there's dry vegetation, there's a lack of rainfall, and getting people into the field, which is very important in those countries, confirming that what the satellite sees is right or that it's wrong, and then adjusting accordingly. Sometimes you only get data once every week when you would want to have it every day. Sometimes you only are able to get it for an area that's, say, 1 kilometer, when you'd really like it to be a much more better resolution, much higher resolution. And in both of these, both space and time, we're able to get, we're gradually refining and improving our remote sensing and early warning systems.
Just outside Rome, in Frascati, data from different ESA satellites converge at the Center for Earth Observation, ESRIN, where a huge receiver rises from the olive groves surrounding the institute.
The dish you see behind me is a receiver for the European satellite Artemis, which relays data from an instrument called MERIS on board the Earth observation satellite Envisat. That takes pictures of global vegetation every 2 or 3 days. By analysing these images, we can create a map showing how the ground is covered on a scale never before achieved.
Nous pouvons réaliser une carte d'occupation des sols à une échelle qui n'a jamais été réalisée auparavant. Pas mal de choses intéressantes du détail. À l'aide de cette carte, la FAO...
This map gives the FAO, the UN Environment Programme and worldwide experts in vegetation a more up-to-date and more precise view of vegetation coverage on a global scale.
À l'échelle globale.
By comparing the maps chronologically, scientists can study development of ground coverage, their humidity and the climate. These data can then be used to create models for more accurate forecasting. Nothing escapes the eye in the sky. But it's not foolproof. If the optical satellite Spot 5, for example, captures a green zone, it doesn't necessarily mean it's over a fertile area. Because public enemy number 1 in the Afar region is a plant called Prosopis duriflora. Introduced as a livestock feed, it soon established itself as a voracious invader, spreading unchecked and choking other species. The savior has become a killer, but the satellite cannot see it.
Pasture, bushland, everything that's green, all the chlorophyll is a sort of reflected in a normal vegetation index. Prosopis, that is another invasive weed, it will reflect as a sort of pasture land on the normalized vegetation index, but in fact they are useless for livestock.
This extra adversary is a burden the Afar nomads could really do without.
This plant's of no use to us, not even the smaller ones. It's like a bullet from a gun. If a cow or a human steps on a thorn, it gets infected and can die. It's like a bullet.
The arid Ethiopian lowlands are a marked contrast to the relatively moderate high plateau, which is well cultivated and where eucalyptus trees grow in abundance. Normally, the lowlands experience 2 dry seasons in a year, during which humans and animals have to survive. Then come the rains, but the returning water does not always bring life. Because the rains can bring with them Rift Valley fever, a killer which not only decimates the livestock population, but can also seriously harm humans.
Rift Valley fever mainly occurs when there is flooding, when there is heavy rainfall. When we see an abnormal cold cloud cover, often it goes together with a normalized vegetation index, NDVI, that shows more chlorophyll on the ground. The two are very important in predicting Rift Valley fever outbreaks.
Satellites can raise the alarm when those conditions coincide, but information on the ground is no less vital to handle it effectively. They need information on how many animals need treatment and where the drugs need to be sent quickly.
This information is obtained from the beneficiaries through the community and my workers, reported to the districts, and again to us, would be reported either to the regional government or to the FEOA in Addis through various means.
The semi-nomad shepherds of Afar have well-developed age-old systems of communication by word of mouth. And while these methods are still used, they rub shoulders now with those of the 21st century. Satellite phones, fax and the internet, which all play a big part in the development of early warning systems, which will become increasingly vital. The figures speak for themselves. Africa needs to feed an ever-expanding population. In Ethiopia, the population was 27 million in 1970, it's 80 million today, and it's reckoned to become 120 million in 15 years. Rich countries might complain about the general rise in food prices, but the FAO says that poorer nations need a new strategy.
I worry when we go through the current phase of high food prices, at the same time as high oil prices, when the first international reaction is give them food. And the first reaction of governments is please reduce the price of food in the market instead of paying that scarce money to helping farmers to produce, so that next year you don't have to subsidize the food again. This is my worry. If we resolve that mental thing, we can do it, and we can do it within seasons rather than decades.